Hey folks, welcome back to the Superhuman Resilience Project. I'm Carrie, your host. For those of you just joining us for the first time, the Superhuman Resilience Project is honestly a mission about the weight that's carried by first responders and veterans. It's about the things that happen to them in their service and how that impacts how they live their lives. So we're really happy that you've joined us here today because we're going to talk today about a conversation that I recently had with a veteran that sparked the idea for today's show. And in doing so, we're going to also be revisiting the 1% rule that Brenda Dietzman shared in our previous episode and exploring what that looks like when we don't invest. So for those of you who don't know me, I love to travel. It is my passion. And since my retirement, that is my 100% goal, is to see every piece of this world that is so massive and so beautiful. So to fund that mission, I drive rideshare. And I pick people up and take them along the way. And sometimes those rides lead to some pretty intense conversations, some pretty deep conversations, and meaningful conversations. So this gentleman got in my car and he was very quiet. And the first thing that happened was he apologized to me because he thought he might smell like alcohol. In the course of our ride, he explained to me that he had just buried his father the day before. He also told me that just a few days prior to that, he had watched his father take his very last breaths, and the impact of what that had on him. He said he had gone through a very rough divorce, and it was from someone he probably never should have been married to. But here's the real kicker. This gentleman told me that he was on this journey, on the ride that was with me, to go to the airport and get on a plane and go somewhere where he could find sobriety again. And the one thing he stressed to me is that he wasn't doing it for anyone else. He was doing it for himself. Now, this guy told me that he's a veteran of the U.S. military. Again, I'm not going to name the branch because I'm not trying to give anything identifying out about him. I'm so proud of him for what he's doing. But he told me that through life, a lot of things had been dealt to him. A lot of the cards that had been dealt to him weren't exactly what most people would consider to be fair. And again, he admits, he said, but then again, whose life is fair, right? We all have the things that we face, the things that drive us, the things that impact us, and the things that form who we are as an individual. And in the course of a 2-hour ride, I saw him grieve for his father. I saw the hurt that he had as he talked about him. I listened to him take responsibility for the actions of his own life. And I listened to his fear about what was going to come next. And the one thing that really stood out to me is that and all the things that he has dealt with, and all the tribulations that he has had to face, he was determined to still move forward. To become sober. To become the man he wanted to be. Now, my friends, he admitted to me that he has made mistakes in his life, and haven't we all? But he also admitted to me that he sometimes felt like people expected more from him than what he could honestly expect of himself. And we talk about that all the time, that feeling of being superhuman, that feeling that we're not allowed to experience loss or fear or pain. But that's not true. Every single person has it. It's a human capacity. It's what we do with it that comes next. Now, beneath his words, this is what I heard. I need help. I have a lot of things that have hurt me in my life, and I need help. And I can't imagine how difficult that was for him to have that conversation with a total stranger. I identified a little bit more about myself. I told him that I was also a veteran. And I told him that I had also buried both of my parents, and that I was there when they took their last breaths. And it's very difficult to take. I told him that there were things that I wished I would have done different in my life. And I encouraged him to keep seeking his truth, his 100%. And I heard from him that people have hurt him. And he's let that slide. He's held that inside. I heard from him that situations have hurt him. And he's held that inside. And these are the same patterns that I have seen with corrections officers, with police officers, with law enforcement of other types, with firefighters, with people who are leaders in those areas, and with people who work in trauma-informed work. Now, in our last episode, we had a co-host, Brenda Dietzman. And Brenda talked about spending 1% of your time, 14 minutes and 24 seconds a day, or actually rounding that up to 15 minutes, with the idea that small, consistent investments create massive change over time. This is important for veterans and leaders and anyone carrying any kind of trauma. You don't have to be a service person. Other people carry trauma as well. But 1% is doable, even when life feels overwhelming. How many times do you hear people say, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for therapy. I don't have time to deal with what's happening. I don't have time for vacation. I don't have time to take care of myself because I'm too busy. 1% is doable, even when life feels overwhelming. And that's a way to reclaim agency without needing a full life overhaul. But what happens when you don't make that 1% investment? That's what we're really going to be exploring today. So let's think about the cost of not making time for change. There are real-world consequences to not taking time for yourself. You end up with emotional stagnation, burnout disguised as resilience, disconnection from self and others, and increased reactivity and decreased intentionality. You often see these patterns in veterans and corrections professionals and firefighters and police officers and other service people, especially with trauma-informed like nurses and doctors. You ask how they're doing, and they use the I'm fine mask. I'm fine. Folks, I'm going to say it again. You'll hear me say it 1,000 times. Fine is not a feeling. You'll see a slow erosion of identity, where they become not the person, but the work, or what they think the work is intended or expects of them. You'll see the belief that change requires huge effort that they simply never start. So, let me just think about this for a minute. I used to think that I didn't have time to take care of myself. I used to think that I didn't have time to deal with others, that I had to be strong. I had to be powerful. I had to be there for everyone else without expecting someone to be there for me. And in exchange, I became angry. Now, I went in and I did my job every day, and I did my best due diligence to perform at my highest capacity. But inside, I was being ripped apart. I was tired. People would become upset with me because something would happen that I had no control over. And yet they would blame me, and I would just take it because that's my job. But that's not true. I had a valid feeling that should have been recognized. I deserved as much as anyone else to feel what I was feeling. I deserved as much as anyone else help for working through the things that I was working through. The problem is I was not brave enough to ask for it. And instead I ended up feeling broken. So let's look for a moment at what that 1% could look like. Let's talk about micro actions for high stress or high performance professionals. How about 5 minutes of grounding? Take a deep breath. What does the air feel like moving in and out of your lungs? Allow your shoulders to drop. Allow your jaw to unclench. Allow your tongue to drop from the roof of your mouth. Allow yourself to stretch. Allow yourself a moment to stop. What does that feel like? Not an "I'm fine" answer. What does it feel like? Can you feel the tension release from your body when your shoulders drop and you take a deep breath and let it out? How about having one intentional conversation? What about sitting down with one of your peers or one of your supervisors and saying, "Today's been a hard day," and actually having a conversation about what that looked like for you, what it felt like for you, and what your perception of that situation was. When was the last time you took a short walk around the block? I found as I'm waiting for rideshare calls, if I'm sitting in an airport lot, I can grab my phone and get out of my car and just take a short walk. And it's amazing to me what that does for me by the end of the day. What about journaling? Even one small sentence. What about opening your journal up and writing, "Today was hard. Today was amazing. Today did not go well. And tomorrow will go better." Because I'm telling you right now, what happens, and we're going to explore this more too in a later episode, but what happens is when you set your mind to, "Oh, today's going to suck," that's what you get, is that today sucks. When you set your mind that today is going to be a good day, you're much more likely to get a good day. And here's another micro action. How about listening to a podcast segment? There are so many podcasts out there. I highly recommend the Superhuman Resilience Project. But there are so many podcasts out there today that are intended for you. They're intended to support you, to help you, to lead you, to guide you. Let's look at some micro action that leaders can take. How about checking in with a team member? Really checking in on them. Instead of saying, "Hey, you're doing okay, right?" Ask them, Tell me what you're feeling about XYZ. Listen to them. Let them be heard without judgment. Set a boundary for yourself. You can't take on everybody else's problems without having some kind of boundaries for yourself as well. You do not deserve to be walked on because you're the leader. You do not deserve to be mistreated because you're the leader, and you should take it. I often heard people when I was coming up through the ranks that that's what leadership does. They take one for the team. And yes, I do believe to an extent that the leadership is responsible. And I also believe that in doing that, you can set a boundary and say, I understand that this is what happened, and I will address it and take care of it. And then holding the people accountable that should be held accountable. How about taking one moment of self-reflection for yourself as a leader? One moment in your day to say, what could I have done differently in that situation to have made it better? And just giving yourself 5 minutes to think about that. 15 minutes. I want to reinforce this message. 1% isn't about perfection. It's about creating direction. When you allow yourself 1% of your own time, you make massive change over a short amount of time. So here's what it's about. Today, I have a call to action for you. I want to invite you to choose 1% today. Choose 15 minutes. Identify one small shift that you can make. And find that 15 minutes. Maybe it's driving in your car. Maybe it's while you're mowing the yard. Maybe it's while you're taking a shower. Give yourself that 15 minutes for you. Reflect upon where you have been skipping your 1% and what that has cost you. And I say that because one of the things in my conversation on the way to the airport with this gentleman was that he was constantly going. He wasn't taking time to work on what he needed to work on. And his problems just grew and grew and grew. So where have you been skipping your 1%, and what has the cost been for you? And I want to remind you that resilience is built in micromoments, not massive leaps. One small step at a time. One small step, not massive leaps. Take that 15 minutes a day. What do you want to accomplish? What do you want to feel? Give that to yourself every single day. And it'll become a habit. And it'll change the impact that your high capacity job, your superhuman leadership capabilities have taken on you. And we'll be exploring that more again next week with our special guest, Sarah Jensen. In closing, I just want to thank you today for showing up, for listening. I really hope that you're going to come back next week and hear the wisdom that Sarah's going to share with us. And we're going to continue at the Superhuman Resilience Project to build our community, to build you up 1% at a time. And for now, be strong enough to stand on your own, be wise enough to know when you need help, and be brave enough to ask for it. Thank you again for joining us today. It has been such a pleasure to talk to you. I really do appreciate your time. Take care.